place to start. So, my coworker was telling me about her own personal metaphysics. Apparently, received in a vision or something. And her metaphysics is Buddhist based. She's Chinese. She's Buddhist. But she believes that when you die and you get reincarnated, but you go to an area somewhere, who knows where you basically can see all the available lives coming up. Like, well, Janie Sue is about to get pregnant. She's about to make love to her husband. And it's going to be the time that it impregnates her. So, if you're going to go back into the world right now, your options are right there. You could go get into that fertilized egg, or that fertilized egg, or that fertilized egg. And, I mean, she didn't spell out all these specifics, but I am picturing, like, there's a sort of a big waiting area where you chill until something strikes your fancy. And, by this metaphysics, of course, that means people are choosing to be that starving African child, or choosing to be that, victim of horrific child abuse. Because in my coworker's philosophy, you can see not just the starting point of the new life that you're about to take on, but the whole way it's going to play out. So you know what's going to happen to you. And the reason people choose those starving children as such is that, they return from one life feeling as though they need to have that experience in some way to become more whole or something like that, right? I think it's a fantastic metaphysics because it's satisfying. Way, way more satisfying than like heaven or something like that. Because, first of all, it points to or implies that you're working on something, right? You're working on a character, or you're working on your soul or something, and you try out, you go have various experiences. Like, I envision it as, okay, I did well with this last life where I had a rough upbringing, but I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and I helped a lot of people and became a congresswoman, something like that. And, by the end of my life, but most of all, what I felt so good about was being kind to people, or, whatever the spiritual truth is you derive from that shit. So I'm feeling pretty badass now. Like, I'm good at this. I'm good at going into new lives, getting immediate, complete amnesia, and then living those lives to good effect. In this model, which is my tweak on it, instead of seeing the whole life in the outset, you only know your beginning, and it's like a game, right? Where I'm gonna take this super hard luck case here, and I'm gonna see if I can get a high score with starving person or whatever. Of course, it's like point values are tripled as the difficulty level goes up. So, if you take on, Kid in Arcadia, and Joe takes on Kid in San Marino, and then the Arcadia Kid might get a couple more points because maybe it's a little easier or a little bit more privilege if you live in San Marino. A little bit, so maybe a couple more points. But So if they both achieve at a certain level, they both achieve to X number of acts of kindness and this sort of professional success or whatever, that kind of stuff, then they both achieved the same number there, then the arcade guy would win because he had a tougher level of difficulties. Barely. But that, if they were both became medical doctors, helped a lot of people, and, the child who was abused terribly for the first 5, 6 years of their life actually ended up becoming happy and having a family and having a good working class job would be way more points than the rich kid doctors or something like that, right? Like that's, I guess, just where I go in my head is to competitions. But that model of metaphysics makes great sense to me. Forgetting about the points, the notion that that there's this soul that is trying to reach enlightenment or something, whatever it's called on this plane of souls, and it has to do life correctly to get there, and obviously it needs to have experiences that will give it the right sort of input to accomplish the outcome that it wants. So, when we're talking about a sort of a personalized metaphysics like that, it's reincarnation, but you get to choose kind of a thing. It's nice because it, of course, infers purpose. And it's nice because you get a sense like, oh, I'll get another chance. That's kind of reassuring, right? And it's nice because it feels like you don't have to answer the, well, what happens after that question. Like that's always the question I would have is when I'd heard about heaven when I was a little kid. Like, okay, but what happens after that? After you die, you go to heaven. And what happens after that? What do you mean nothing happens after that? You just stay in heaven. But what happens after that? Nothing. That's so unsatisfying. Right, like... Now, what happens after the whole reincarnation, choose your own adventure thing? I don't know that answer to that either, but what happens when the world explodes? Then we don't get to play anymore? Or... But the thing is, it's fine. It's less irritating to not know what's after that because there's a whole bunch of shit to think about before you have to get to there. With heaven, it's just like, well, you're dead, then you go to heaven. There's nothing else to think about. It's like basically time is stopped. You don't, you have to have an end for the time to have any meaning. So heaven just seems to me, when I was young enough to conceive of it as like a possible place, but I mean, I guess I still have the same conceptions now, same sort of visualizations of it. Obviously, clouds. There's everyone has clouds in heaven. Wherever heaven is, there is water vapor. That's good. And, it just sort of like a nice sort of gardeny-ish kind of... Like, I don't really see buildings in heaven. I see kind of like pathways and stuff, like pathways and white clouds and stuff. I'm not very good at visualizing, but it didn't sound very interesting. It doesn't sound very fun. You don't really want to go there. And they say, well, you get to be next to God all the time. But I mean, I don't even know what that's going to feel like. If let's say that You know, I'm not trying to be like a dick atheist who's like, see how dumb religion is. I love religion. I think it's fantastic, but I mean, and I know it's just sort of adolescent to even take any sort of pot shots of religion. It's sort of like teasing toddlers because they don't do calculus or something. Or it's like, it's not, see, that's so offensive. Why would I even say that? It's not, it's not like teasing toddlers. No, see, this is the thing. Taking pot shots at religious people is just like being a dick and a douchebag, and there's no reason for it. Taking pot shots at religion is entirely missing the point because that's what's like. It's like yelling at fish for not flying. Religion's not supposed to withstand, you know, probing intellectual scrutiny. That's not what it's for. It's for I mean, I had my spiritual period there, where I was engaged in things like praying and meditating and stuff. I found it very engaging in my process. It helped engage me in the process of intellectually coming to terms with alcohol, which is ultimately what I need to do. But the spiritual side wasn't intellectual at all, but it allowed me to accept that lack of intellectual that the lack, you know, alcohol caused me to lose faith in my intellect because my drinking was more powerful than my will. And because alcohol is a very chaotic drug, by which I mean you don't necessarily make the best decisions on alcohol because it's a judgment impairing drug. And one of the things that it impairs one's judgment about is consumption of further alcohol. So, kids, don't drink. Unless you're a normal person who can handle it just fine. But even then, try to put it off as long as possible. It's kind of a waste of money and time. But some people are fine with it. I mean, some people enjoy it and whatever. I'm glad I'm doing this. I wonder if I'm going to be glad I'm doing it later when I look at these things. It's always that distance. But see, that's a great thing about not drinking. I may later on go like, but I know I'm, you know, it's not terrible. It's not like nothing to be. I haven't done anything that I'm going to feel ashamed about here. You know, that's great. It's great to not have to worry about that. Good night.